The whole world expected a massacre. Spain, the European champions, a team so good they had not lost a match in over a year. Standing across from them was Cape Verde, a tiny island nation of fewer than 600,000 people playing in their very first World Cup match ever. Nobody gave them a chance. Not the experts, not the betting odds, not even some of their own fans, if we are being honest. Think about the gap between these two teams for a second. Spain had players from some of the biggest clubs on the planet, players who get paid more in a single week than most people see in years. Cape Verde's squad was full of names nobody outside the islands had ever heard of. Their own goalkeeper, the man who was about to become the story of the entire night, plays his club football in Portugal's second division. Not the Premier League, not La Liga, the second division. A level most casual fans have never even watched a single match of. That is who Spain was about to walk out against, and then this 40-year-old goalkeeper named Vozinha walked out onto the field at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, and for 90 minutes he made the entire football world believe in miracles again. By the end of the night, the scoreboard read 0-0. But that number does not even begin to tell you the real story, because this was not a boring draw. This was one of the most one-sided 90 minutes you will ever see, and somehow, the team getting completely outplayed walked away the real winner. Let's go through exactly what happened. Because once you see the numbers, you will understand why people are calling this one of the greatest goalkeeping performances in World Cup history. Spain controlled the ball almost the entire match, 70% possession. That means for every 10 minutes of football, Spain had the ball for 7 of them, and Cape Verde only had it for 3. The experts who measure these things looked at the quality of chances created and said Spain should have scored at least 1 goal, probably more. Cape Verde, by that same measurement, barely had a chance to score at all. On paper, this should have been over by halftime, but Vozinha had other plans. In the first half alone, he made 4 big saves, diving left, diving right, throwing his body in front of shot after shot from some of the best attackers on the planet. Players like Lamine Yamal, one of the most talked about young stars in the world, even though he was still managing an injury and could not play the full match. And Vozinha just kept saying no. By the time the clock hit the 83rd minute, he had made 8 saves in total. 8 times a Spanish player thought they had scored. 8 times this goalkeeper from a tiny island nation said, "Not today." The final 10 minutes were chaos. Spain threw everything they had at the Cape Verde goal. Shot after shot. Corner after corner. Pedri tried. Rodri tried. Oyarzabal tried. Yamal himself came close. Pedri even picked up a yellow card in stoppage time for a hard foul. The kind of foul that happens when a team is desperate and the clock is running out. And every single time, the ball did not go in. When the final whistle blew, Cape Verde had done something that had never happened before in their country's history. They had earned a point at the World Cup against Spain in their very first match ever. Now, here is where the story stops being about football and starts being about something much bigger. Right after the final whistle, while his teammates were celebrating around him, Vozinha broke down in tears. Not tears of joy. Not at first, anyway. These were tears that came from somewhere deeper. He told reporters why. He said he grew up being raised by his grandparents. They were the ones who took care of him when he was a kid, the ones who probably first watched him dive around in a backyard pretending to be a goalkeeper, and they never got to see this moment. They had passed away a few years ago, but there was something else. Something happening that same night, thousands of miles away on the island of Cape Verde. His mother, a woman named Ana Candida Evora, was sitting at home. Not in the stadium, not anywhere near Atlanta. She was watching her son make history on a television screen back home because she could not afford to be there in person. Here is why. Cape Verde is one of several countries where, under current United States rules, visitors are required to pay something called a visa bond before they are allowed to enter the country. This is basically a large deposit, sometimes as much as $15,000, that travelers have to pay just for the chance to visit. The money is supposed to be returned later, but you still have to come up with it first all at once, often with very little warning. $15,000 for one woman to watch her son play in a soccer match. Picture that for a second. That is more money than many families on the islands of Cape Verde see in an entire year, all asked for up front just to sit in a stadium and cheer. There was supposed to be an exception for families of World Cup players. The rules say relatives of athletes should not have to pay this bond at all. But somewhere between the announcement and the actual day of the match, that exception did not reach Vozinha's mother in time. The paperwork, the timing, the money, none of it lined up before the match started, so she stayed home. My mum could not be here either, for a visa issue and the money we had to pay for it, Vozinha told reporters, his voice breaking. We did not manage to do this in time. Think about that for a second. This man had just done something almost nobody believed was possible. He had just stood toe-to-toe with the best team in the world and refused to lose. And in the biggest moment of his entire career, the two women who raised him, who loved him, who probably believed in him before anyone else on earth did, were not there to see it. One because she had passed away, the other because of $15,000 in a form that did not get filed in time. But here is where this story does something a lot of these World Cup stories do not do. It actually starts to get better. Word about Vozinha's mother spread fast. Within a day, a member of the United States Congress, the second highest-ranking Democrat in the House of Representatives, publicly called on the Secretary of State to step in and make sure she could get a visa before the next match. The State Department said they were now reaching out directly to help the family, and people who had never even heard of Cape Verde before this match started a fundraiser to help cover whatever costs stood in her way. That fundraiser hit its goal within hours. And this is not just a Cape Verde problem. Cape Verde is actually one of 5 African nations that qualified for this World Cup and ended up on that same visa bond list. 5 teams. 5 entire countries full of families who might be sitting at home for the exact same reason Vozinha's mother was. His story just happened to be the one that broke through because of the tears, because of the 8 saves, because of a result nobody saw coming. But somewhere out there right now, there are almost certainly other parents, other grandparents, other brothers and sisters who wanted to be in that stadium and simply could not find $15,000 in time. So here is where we are now. A 40-year-old goalkeeper that almost nobody outside his own country had heard of 2 weeks ago just became one of the most talked about athletes at the entire World Cup. He held off Spain for 90 minutes with 8 incredible saves. He cried for the grandparents who raised him and never got to see it. And because of all the attention his tears brought, there is now a real chance his mother could be sitting in the stands the very next time he plays. Cape Verde takes on Uruguay next. If everything comes together in time, Ana Candida Evora might finally get to watch her son in person. Let's be fair for a second, because this channel does not deal in fantasy. The State Department says there is no record that she ever officially applied for the visa, and that the bond waiver for players' families was always available. She just needed to use it in time. So maybe this was not some evil plan to keep a mother away from her son. Maybe it was paperwork, timing, and a system that is confusing enough that even people who qualify for an exception can fall through the cracks. That is still worth talking about. Because if a system is so complicated that a World Cup player's own mother cannot figure out how to use the exception meant for her, that system is not working the way it is supposed to. What started as a football story about a massive underdog turned into something much bigger. A story about family, about sacrifice, about a man who carried 2 grandparents and a mother with him onto that field, whether they could be there or not. Spain may have had 70% of the ball, but Cape Verde and one incredible goalkeeper had something Spain didn't have that night: heart. So what do you think? Was this the greatest underdog story of the World Cup so far? Drop it in the comments. I read everyone. Dropping a like genuinely helps more than you'd think. Subscribe if you want more World Cup stories that go beyond just the score. Because sometimes the most important parts of a football match never even show up on the scoreboard.